Okay, this is OK here, and in this stream I would like to go through some games played about a month or two ago in the candidates of the Crazyhouse World Championship 2018 by JKtheBullfrog, none of which were live streamed. So JKtheBullfrog against Opera was live streamed by me, against 12 Teen was live streamed by me, against Clearcast was live streamed by Jan Lee, against GSVC was live streamed by me, against Schwanet was one of the earliest matches and was live streamed by Opera. Against Master Tan, no one covered it. Against Sexy I Know It, no one covered it. And against Little Plotkin, I believe was covered by Jan Lee and Yasa Sarawan. And against Fumitoks, no one covered it. So that left 3 matches, Master Tan, Sexy I Know It, and Fumitoks, which weren't commentated on live. And a 4th match against Blitz Bullet, which unfortunately was never played. If that match had been played, then JK would have been 4th outright on 5.5 points out of 10 in the candidates. As it happened, Little Plotkin also scored 5.5 with exactly the same number of game points. So Little Plotkin and JKtheBullfrog both came 4th equal in the candidates tournament, just behind 3rd place 12 Teen on 8 out of 10, GSVC with fewer games won but more match games on 8.5 out of 10, and right out there in the lead, Operawaisen, who then went on to take down the 2017 Crazyhouse World Champion Jan Lee, winning 9.5 games out of 10, only being held up by Sexy I Know It 5-5. So I just want to look at 3 of these matches which were not covered live and just play through them. And the first of these matches was against Fumitoks, a national master from Russia. So let's have a look how it went. So JKtheBullfrog is a great advocate of E4 in Crazyhouse. He thinks D4 is giving away white's advantage. The Stockfish and other engines would agree, but personally I quite like D4. And Fumitoks went for E6, French defense. And let's see. So it's a French defense, but instead of playing D4, he plays Knight C3, perhaps to get out of book a little, I'm imagining. Perhaps that's the system he uses. I think we'll see. It's the kind of system that he adopts a lot of the time, this E4, Knight C3. Although the problem with it is it does invite D5. Well, maybe we'll see this, D5, D4. And indeed we see Fumitoks playing D4. If you don't play D4 yourself, then black can play D4 and gain extra space. Unfortunately, okay, I'll have to put Spotify away because of its adverts, which is a shame. It was playing some nice music. I should have played it from local files. Okay, so what would he play here? The knight doesn't really have any squares to go to apart from here. This is a bit out of the way. This is a bit passive. And indeed you can get away with just leaving the knight where it is and playing bishop b5 check. c6, now white's got 2 pieces hanging. And I guess the purpose of c6 is it's blocking up this knight from developing ever. Black, I mean, if I were faced with this, I would probably have played bishop to d7. But that's a mistake, I just realised, because then that cuts off the defence of d4. So there is a certain sense in this bishop b5 check. It's forcing something to be played on c6, either knight c6 or pawn c6. But if knight c6, then that's going to create a weakness on c6. So c6 is the best move. And then bishop d3. Okay, so this is a sort of interesting setup that JKtheBullfrog was using. Interesting kind of French defense. Knight h6. So just worth noticing, black could have taken that knight, but white is actually quite happy to lose a piece for a pawn for a few reasons. He gets to open up his bishop onto a strong diagonal pointing at black's kingside. This pawn will also be advancing, and then this bishop will also open up. So the two bishops will be really quite strong, and the queen d-file will be open. In the meantime, the black bishop is blocked in. The dark squares are weak, and black's knight is going to take time to develop. So you might, for example, see a move like this, e5, just solidifying the center. This is just an example line. Things can go downhill quite. This is in fact a game between Vempele as white and Chouinette as black, just illustrating the difficulty that black can face in this kind of line. And already here, white has mate in 6 with knight takes h8, but this was whatever. It's check and whatever black does, he's getting mated. So that just gives you an idea of how, although you're losing a piece, it's not the end of the world. Having said that, if black doesn't take this knight, it's quite hard to see how this bishop is actually going to develop ever. So bishop d3 is an interesting move. It's almost tempting black not to take it in order to shut off white's pieces. Knight h6 is interesting. So I guess if knight f6, that would be inviting the push, e5. So knight h6 is taking advantage of the fact that this diagonal is shut off, and so it's a safe square for the knight. Castles, bishop e7, and now the knight decides to develop. So it's still an even position, we're still in the opening, still developing, but white's pieces are slowly coming out to play. Knight f6, takes, and the queen is forced to go quite passive back to g7 to protect the knight. And perhaps a good move here is bishop to e4 apparently, but knight takes d4 was played just to drop a pawn here. But why bishop e4? What's the idea of bishop e4? The idea is to try and pick up a knight for f6. Also worth saying, bishop takes h6 is also possible. Hi there, A-boss. Yeah, this is going to be a very chill, very slow stream. As indeed it is approaching 5 AM. just having a look at some of these games from about a month or two ago from JKtheBullfrog. I just showed his table. 3 of the games not yet covered: Fumitoks, Sexay Note, and Master Town. We're just having a quick look through some of these games. Well, I'm starting off especially slowly so that we get a kind of feeling for the openings he's playing, and then once we've got that feeling, I think we'll be able to go faster because we'll have then the sense of why he's doing the things he's doing. So here he took this pawn. Clearly there are great dark square weaknesses in black's position, and he wants to take advantage. So queen takes d4. It turns out actually here Stockfish is crying out for if knight takes d4, because if f6, which is the idea, the queen can drop back to f8, and white is still lacking another pawn to put, say, on g7, and doesn't have a knight to drop on f7 either. Okay, so he gets the knight, but I guess the idea here is black can defend all the mating threats. Still looks a little bit uncomfortable. So the key is white only has a rook, so you just need to check the back rank. Yeah, all the squares are covered on the back rank, and now meanwhile black's got a mating threat. And just as an example line, if white were to defend with h3, which is maybe not the best move, even queen takes h3 is mating. Knight at f3, pawn here takes, second knight here, are 2 knights and pawn mate. So this is just an illustration that white cannot be complacent here, and sacrificing the knight is sacrificing a piece that generally I feel would have instantly played knight takes, because the knight here is beginning an attack on the white king. And with the knight in hand, that becomes very dangerous. But Fumitoks played queen takes, bishop takes knight, and it's still an even position, but it's getting quite sharp. Bishop e3. Still, white's queen side is rather locked away, and I guess black is taking advantage of that, castling on the queen side. So white's piece is not really developed on that side of the board. Queen drops back, knight to c3, and here apparently queen takes g2 was rather interesting. But Fumitoks plays queen e5, f4, queen d6. Now white's pieces are beginning to coordinate. So the threat, of course, is taking on f5. So he sacks his queen. Now what's the threat? The threat is to come in here with the check, and when the king comes across, to drop a pawn here to bring the king to c7, then do another check, get the queen in maybe. The king could still go to h8 though. So just if black does absolutely nothing, maybe a better move actually is queen at h8 first. Yeah, I didn't actually mention that. So JKtheBullfrog was in fact the wild card of these candidates. Opperwaisen was a wild card, and 12teen was the runner-up last year, and JKtheBullfrog was introduced as a last-minute wild card just a few weeks before the candidates started. So there was an 11th candidate instead of the 10 that were planned, because he'd been playing on Lichess all year, but had joined the site after the CWC had started, so it seemed appropriate to give him a wildcard. And certainly his level was up there. And I should say, actually, Chouinette coming 6th came exactly in the middle of all 11 candidates. So the top 5, all those guys were better than Chouinette. This is not in order, but it was Opperweisen, GSVC in 2nd, 12 Teen in 3rd, and JKtheBullfrog and Little Plotkin in 4th equal. Those 5 could be should definitely be considered as the top 5 players in Crazyhouse for their feat in this year-long grueling event. And Chouinette there in 6th. Now, having said that, Fumitoks in 7th is a match certainly for Chouinette and for a lot of these players. In fact, he beat Chouinette 7-3, so and it was still, and there were no even the lowest. Here are the full standings. So even Clearcast in last place scored a respectable 2 out of 10, so 2 wins. Or was it 2 wins? It was 1 win against Blitz Bullet, quite convincing win, yes, and a 2nd win against Master Tan. But GSVC, if it's apart from Oppo with 9.5 out of 10, certainly the story of the tournament was GSVC. Just look how he won almost every game 6-4. 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. Crushed JK 8-2, that was stunning. And crushed Fumitoks 8-2 as well. But lost 2-8 to Oppa. And then drew against 12 Teen. So drawing against 12 Teen, holding up 12 Teen in his pursuit of Oppa. And in doing so, in fact, did better than 12 Teen in the candidates. So, yeah. Well, we're still on game 1, so we'll see how far we go. Yeah, I just realised Queen at A8 is also something to be worried about in this position. So B6, I'm not sure how that defends. Queen at A8 did come. This did indeed come. And Knight B5 is quite nice. But that wasn't played in the game. Knight B5 and then dropping a pawn on C7 is pretty brutal. That would be a lovely checkmate. Oh, the knight can take it, but then we have a smothered mate on the other side. Yeah, that would have been very pretty. But knight takes B7 is very efficient as well, because the rook just hacks his way through the black position, and the king has to keep on coming up, and the queen invades. So that was game 1, which JKtheBullfrog won. In fact, he started this entire match very strongly. Game 2. So JKtheBullfrog was black. Yeah, and we get these sorts of positions where the knight wants to move so that the e-pawn can move. So for those who are unfamiliar with, black is quite happy to lose the knight for a pawn. That's not a problem. It develops the bishop, and it gives you quite a strong, stable kingside. Hi there, IJH chess, yo yo yo. So the problem is, if white doesn't take the offer, then at some point black does want to get his pieces out, so wants to move that knight. Now the second problem he has is that this knight is not very stable on e4. It doesn't have any squares it can go to. It can always sacrifice on f2, but that's not so strong. If this knight hasn't come out, it can't exchange with this knight, and crucially, if d4 has been played, this square is covered. So it can't backtrack and reroute itself somehow. So f3 is always a kind of slight annoyance in this position. then you can't really sack on f2 because f3 has already been played. You're not getting anything for your knight. So f3 is always an annoying move in this kind of position. So f3 wasn't played in this game by Fumitoks, but as an example, if f3 were played, you would often just give up that knight for a pawn and try and do something like so. If knight c3, queen h4 check is interesting. If knight h3, then d3 is an interesting idea, just cutting off the defense of d4. So these are just, so black is not winning, but still holding his own in obviously a difficult opening. So f3 is an interesting idea, but f3 was, so just to go through that line again, I think that's a good line. f3, e6, takes. If he does knight h3, doing d3, cutting off the defense. If he does the much more likely knight c3, queen h4 check, and if he does something like this, yeah, it's quite difficult for black. I mean, I just played a random move, and it says that my random move is better than the moves the Stockfish was thinking about. So it really is a tough ask for black, because just plopping your knight on the board turns out could be just stronger even than Stockfish, the best moves that Stockfish saw in that line. So it makes you question whether queen h4 is really the best approach. But it's not clear what else there is. Bishop d7 maybe as well, but then the knight is taking this pawn potentially. Knight is taking this pawn. That's another way this game could go. Okay, but we're getting a little distracted because Fumitoks just went for castles. Worth saying here, instead of e6, is it worth getting the bishop outside the pawn chain before playing e6? It's always a dilemma. You have to try and consider, is there sufficient pressure on c6, on this pin, to warrant just staying a little bit more solid? Because you might regret it later that you don't have access to h3. Okay, so Fumitoks doesn't go for the material grab with f3. Instead, he's going for knight b c3. So why would he want to do this? It's probably because he wants to pick up a knight and put a knight on h5. Bishop e7 doesn't really do anything to stop that idea, which is why another approach is knight takes c3, knight takes c3, and there's a move which actually has never been played. Let's see if it's still never been played. Yes, it's still never been played. So this is a novelty for you guys. Knight takes d4. And the idea is we're hitting the bishop, but once the bishops are exchanged, what's the idea now? Because we might hope for knight at e2 check, but we can't do that because the knight covers it. So the idea is actually dropping on h3 and going for knight at f3 check. Okay, so it might not work as well as I hoped, but it's an idea. Anyway, whether it's a good idea or not, I'm not sure, but it's an idea. This is some very long line. Yeah, that's not necessarily the best line for white. So it's something I was pondering. Okay. So bishop e7, f3 is played. Actually, knight takes e4 as the plan of knight takes e4 and dropping on h5 is strong. Now the bishop has moved off f8. But f3 was played, knight g5, and that's an advantage of this bishop. We can set up, if we could get an exchange, we'd have a bishop on g5, which would be really good to control h6. Bishop to e3. Bishop to d3 is Stockfish quite likes, I guess, because it's trying to eventually target h7. But bishop to e3, castles. Okay, so black's still holding his own to some extent. Bishop d3 comes, f5 takes with the bishop. He can't take with the rook because otherwise the bishop would pick up the knight. And if he took with the queen, then the queen can always be hit with tempo. Okay, so the knight is hit and the knight drops back. Okay. And this is a slightly precarious position. It's still only +2 for white, but it's already suggesting bishop takes h7 as being an idea, just blasting open black's king rather. But knight d3, probably an even stronger move from white, just staying really safe. At g6 and queen f3. So considering posting the knight up on f5, and black is actually looking fairly solid. So it's quite solid play from both players. Okay, so let's see. Queen d1, knight takes d3, c takes d3, bishop at g4. So somehow white's losing some of his edge, despite playing good moves. Black is maintaining a solid position. Knight takes d5. Okay. So kind of going for it. Quite understandable because it would open up this diagonal onto the king. So there are questions of whether knight at f2 is better, but this seems like a good plan. Takes. The problem is obviously that the queen can be chased away quite easily, but there's a nice pawn you can pick up. Okay, so it doesn't feel like white's really done anything wrong this game. So, and yet black is really solid, and even white's trying to start to attack, but it turns out black's attack is pretty nasty. Even taking the rook here was good, but knight at h3 is powerful. Takes and takes the rook, and the light squares are very weak in white's position. So if he were to do a move like, it's difficult to say. If you were to do a move like this to try and at least alleviate some of the light square weaknesses, well, I think anything black does is going to be good, but knight at h3 apparently is mating. So king h1, rook takes h2, king takes h2. I'm just following the Stockfish's suggestions here. At g3, so if you take, I'm going to mate you on h2. So I have to step here. Okay, but then rook at h2, king comes here, and then bishop takes pawn is checkmate. So just not enough coverage for the white king. So that was an incredibly well played game from JKtheBullfrog, overturning white's advantage with some really just very solid play, and I don't feel white really did anything wrong. It's just a slowly, maybe didn't play the sharpest moves sometimes, but didn't play anything bad, just quite slowly found himself to be ground down a little. Lost a few tempi here and there, and then it was all over. At this point, bishop takes rook, and then, oh, black won on time. Okay, so it wasn't a resign. So it was a strong start from JKtheBullfrog, 2-love up after 2 games. So game 3. Now actually there was a pause in the match because I think JKtheBullfrog was at work or he had to attend some work. So when they restarted, JKtheBullfrog, who should have been white, actually was black for a second time. But it didn't matter because every pair of games they're switching, and the switch has taken place after 2 games. So they've both been black and white once. So all games from now on are the opposite colour of what one might have expected. This is game 3, and JK is black again, and we've seen this now, so we can go a little bit faster. Except we're seeing a different line. This time, interesting. So what JK is doing is he's, instead of going for d5 and knight e5, which worked very well for him in the last game, he's going for d6 to provoke e takes f6. And he's going to play d5 later, a tempo down. So takes, bishop e5, a6, the bishop drops back, and now he plays d5. So he gets this setup, which is quite desirable, although it has cost a piece and also a tempo now in this position. But as you see from the Stockfish evaluation, white doesn't have much compensation. I mean, black certainly does have compensation for the material he's lost. Knight e2, bishop b4 check, just trying to develop quickly. c3 would have maybe, yeah, c3 is double-edged because you create a weakness on c2. So instead knight, okay, so he's going straight in for an attack. Rook g1, takes. Now this is very high-risk strategy that JK is using here, and Stockfish doesn't like it at all. You've got a nice attack on the white king, but you're severely weakening your own king here. So, and Stockfish thinks deeper and it thinks, yeah, it is valid, but it's really a high-risk strategy. Takes. Interesting. I wonder if it was preparation though. Queen e7 in this position. And if I just look at the opening explorer just to see, no, nobody's played. This is the only time, in fact, this whole line has been played. And then he takes knight at f5. Okay, so rook can just drop back, but g7 is covered. Yeah, now it turned out white had a really crazy move in this position. Just knight at g8, hitting the queen. Because you don't really want to take that knight, or else you've got like a rook on your back rank, you're blocking, and then pawns could be dropping on the 7th rank. So actually you'd want to just give away the queen, probably, in that kind of situation. I'd say white has a slight advantage, but Starfish at low depth is even, yeah, it's changing its mind. So knight at g8 was a very creative idea. Obviously, this is just disastrous. Rook takes g8, rook takes knight here. This is game over. So knight at g8 was a very nice idea, but quite hard to see. So instead, knight h5 was played. So if you take the rook, you're taking back with check. So this is less good. Takes, king to d8. Takes. And yeah, black got quite a good attack going. He's taking a knight with check, which he drops. King runs. He's taking the bishop. And now this rook is helping provide coverage. So the rook is a defender as well as an attacker. Takes. This is actually quite a sharp position. I mean, you see from the engine not being certain who's winning. Bishop at g5. So we have a skewer of the queen and the king. Blocks. We don't have a second bishop. So once we've takes, check. And this is a sneaky move, hitting the rook, but the intention was also to cut off the king. So when the rook moved, JK finished off the job with queen a3, we have a queen invasion, whatever you block with. Or if you move the king, queen takes is checkmate. So that pawn at e2 move was very sneaky. Pawn at e2 was ostensibly to attack the rook, but its real purpose was this very nice mating pattern. I think that's a nice one to keep in mind. Okay, so that was game 3 and 3-love to JK the Bullfrog. As we'll see, Fumitoks did fight back, but JK had a very good start. Okay, so now we've got another white game. So we've seen this in the first game in the stream. Bishop here check, and white here has got 2 pieces hanging. But he drops back to d3, and he's just inviting black to take this knight, and we see knight h6. So we're seeing exactly the same line as in game 1. Bishop e7, knight e2, and the knight comes in to f4. Knight c6, e5. So it's just the same pattern. Knight comes into h5, knight f6. So we're seeing, again, even on move 12 and still on move 13, we're just following exactly the same pattern, except in game 1, white played knight takes d4, whereas in this game, c3. So JK really wants a pawn, but he's what we just said in game 1 is actually knight takes pawn is a big mistake, because knight takes knight then brings the knight into a very attacking position, and also with the knight in hand. In fact, Fumitoks played queen takes, which wasn't as good, and JK was able to convert that game as white. But c3 does look like a better move. Castles, he gets the pawn he wants, he gets another pawn, and he's ready to get to work, except it's all gone wrong, because he's lost his bishop, which was the coordinator of the whole attack, was this bishop. So what was the correct approach? This, then knight f6 check, and you're hitting this bishop, which is really nasty actually, and then knight takes bishop. Well, drop a pawn or a bishop at g7. Let's just go pawn at g7. Seems safe enough. And Stockfish quite likes just going for the material. But even if you don't go for the material, you can go bishop at g5, and then pawn takes pawn coming, I imagine. It isn't the best move, but okay, takes, and then take the pawn. Maybe. So that would have been certainly, yeah, I think that's quite a good strategy. And if black takes back, we've got a pawn for e7, and we've got a pawn later for f6. Rather uncomfortable position, one would have to say, for black. So, yeah, this bishop is the master of ceremonies, and f6 is a very nice move to kick it. Takes, takes. So white's picking up a few pawns, but he hasn't got the anchor. He hasn't got the pivot point from which to build his chain. And so he has to start again. He drops all the way back. Bishop at h3. So apparently just being more patient here was good for black. So for example, it says bishop at d4 or knight at f4. Black has actually cleared out everything from his king side, so it's quite understandable he wanted to get in quickly. But the problem with this is white is able to use this material to get in quickly himself. I mean, quite even stronger than f4. It's bishop at h6 and takes the rook and drops the pawn on h6, and then now you've got your anchor point. So this threatening pawn here, rook here. So this is powerful stuff. But in fact he played f4, so that's going to be his new anchor. Bishop. So the bishop and this bishop and this pawn are going to be the anchor, you would imagine, of any attack. And the pawn chain begins. Takes, drops, takes. Pawn chain is beginning again from f6, and as you see, it's no significant advantage for now, but it's just a very uncomfortable position for black to hold. Difficult. Knight takes h6, rook takes h6, and maybe this was the critical error. Seems knight f7 is good. Replacing, I think it's a good principle. If you have a defender and you have it removed, it's a good idea if you can replace it with tempo. And if you don't, as we see here, replaced it too late. So this time you're placing it in response to the opponent piece rather than before the opponent piece. The disadvantage being that if you replace it first, then any piece you can take back. But now it's white who has the initiative, just a tiny initiative, but it's enough. It's not as if his own king is comfortable. But so knight at h6 and knight at h8 are good moves. Knight at h6, king takes pawn, knight takes rook, rook here. Taking the rook was actually a mistake. At g5 was good, but he was not going to regret the mistake. So here JK found the winning combination at g5. Slightly more testing was king e7. So you've got a pawn and a rook in hand, you just build, that's not testing. No, slightly more testing was king takes g5 rather. But then you have pawn takes pawn. Well, yeah, that's not testing either, because you just drop back and you've got this, and you drop back and you've got this. It's not testing at all. The only reason it might be testing is because black can sack the queen, but once black sacked a queen, then the game is up. So we see like so. What happened in the game, g5, the king went for a runner. The knight comes out, forcing the king to only one square. The pawn comes out, forcing the king to only one square. And the rook swings in to deliver checkmate. Okay, so now Fumitoks found himself love 4 down, which is rather uncomfortable. So game 5, we're looking from. We should keep it from JKtheBullfrog's perspective for the sake of this stream. So we've seen this position before with this d6 idea, which was introduced in game 3. Check, knight comes out, queens are exchanged, and you would think bishop d7, but then queen takes pawn is a slight problem, and black's dropping a lot of pawns. So king d8. Black's position is looking a little bit hairy. On the other hand, black does have a mate in one threat, just defended. Bishop drops back to defend g7. Queen drops back to defend everything. Now the bishop can come out again. So there are a lot of holes in black's position. Exchanges queens, takes the rook. Even taking that pawn was completely fine. And a very nice move here. Rook takes pawn in the hope of rook takes rook and a checkmate, but it doesn't work. So there is rook at d1, but he's cunningly given himself just a little bit of luft for his king. King f2 takes. So it's the sort of position where you worry that white is doing really well, but will they be able to convert? But actually in this position, white won on time. So, but to give an idea, something like e3, well, that's no good. If something like just a random kind of move, knight at e6 is a slight problem. Takes, d takes, and how to defend the bishop. Going on a counteroffensive might be one idea, but if we just move the bishop, takes, 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 pawn and rook mate. Okay, even this. Okay, so let's look at game 6. And as I said, we've seen a lot of these. Okay, so we're seeing something slightly different. So just do a recap again. We're seeing a French defense, but not an advanced French, but an exchange on e4. Yeah, this is interesting. So JK plays this knight from b1 to c3 to e4 to g5. And you can imagine the other knight coming to join, putting a lot of pressure on f7. It's the idea of this kind of maneuver. And indeed, he sacrifices the bishop on e6 to bring the king out. Is this going to be successful? Stockfish is quite happy with black here. Black has to defend very accurately. This is a nice little combination. Attacks, attacks. But does it work? Not clear that it does. So a nice check to defend the king, which otherwise is in a precarious situation. Again, picking up material, but have we got enough material for mate? Rook at g8, king e7, bishop comes in. So this is a position where white has a good attack, maybe even close to mating attack, but not that many pieces in hand, only a pawn and a knight. And should the attack fail, black has ideas of knight to h3 check. If takes, queen at g2 is mate. But having said that, it's impressive how white is defended. h3 is covered. f2 is covered, so smothered mate attacks are not going to work. So it's this kind of preparedness of both sides for what is to come that makes this game quite impressive. But even more impressive, I think, is the fact that JK is completely running out of material here, but as we'll see, I think he does okay. So what happened here? Check, takes. Yeah, so here the check is met with the counter check. And you can't afford, to let that pass, because knight takes bishop, rook takes rook will come with check if you take with the h pawn. If you take with the f pawn, you have ideas of knight f7, queen h, knight f2, queen h1. So you have to take it, and even taking the pawn, and a very critical move in this position. Blocking is completely fine, but once white takes, black had to drop back. The moment he took back, there was indeed a mate for white, because he's on a square that can be checked with pawns. And that's indeed what happened. Takes, knight drop, bishop, knight. If the king goes the other way, then this is just going to be mating fairly shortly, because he has to drop with something, and then it's a kind of usual trick for, what is it? I would have said take d8, but yeah, take d8 is good. King here. A sneaky move is going at b6 just to block everything off. So if c takes b6, you can simply go bishop at b8, rook takes, queen takes, rook checkmate, defended. So a really nice position white is taking advantage of. And if king takes b6, drawing the king all the way out, well, we have queen takes c7, and the king is truly out in the open. a4, king takes c5, queen to d6. If king to b6, we've got queen to b4, and the king is cut off. And just one pawn, one diagonal will mate. Sorry, that's not quite true. Two diagonals will mate. One to push the king back, and a second to mate. So can't really go that way. So that's why Fumi went the way he did. But unfortunately, this way falls to a mate in 2 by at f7 or at h7 in this position. So that was game 6. By which stage JK now leads by 5 games to 1. So game 7, we see this opening again. But black hasn't castled, which makes this f-file rather concerning. So I have to say, I'm not sure about this position. And interesting the way JK drops a pawn on g6. I guess the idea is to stop bishop takes knight and knight at h5, which he deemed to be a serious threat. And castles comes in its own time. So there's a threat here of knight takes e5, bishop drops back, queen develops, rooks develop. Okay, we have this h3 and we immediately cash in. So was it a good idea to go for the knight? Maybe. Well, this is something that definitely requires consideration. So rook takes d1. Maybe quite a nice move actually. Just needs a pawn for g2, takes, puts a pawn on g2, and now the white's position is really quite uncomfortable. Unfortunately, he's also lost his queen. And this is a nice little combination. First, a skewer, and when the skewer fails, the knight comes in for a fork. And with that move, black is holding on in there. And with these pawns in hand, he's maintaining aggression. But worth saying that in this position, queen here was a very beautiful move, with the idea of king takes g2, rook at f2, if the king drops back, rook takes h2 as mate, and if king h3, rook at h4 is also mate. So instead of queen at g2, the real move from the book, as it were, it's queen at f2. Attacks the queen, and JK just goes in and finds mate. So at that point it was 6 games to 1, and the match was decided with 3 games to play. And games 8, we see an advanced French for the first time. Fumitoks just sacks his queen for a bishop. Picks up that pawn. Okay, JK goes for this piece for 2 pawns exchange, which is very reasonable in Crazyhouse. But the problem is the queen ends up on a square where it can be hit with tempo. And we see that in this game. We saw it earlier as well. Somehow white may be threatening sort of mates in 2, but they're not quite materializing. Queen takes b7, threatening the rook. Castles defends the rook. Doesn't want to spend time backtracking, so he lays another piece on. But it's not clear. Maybe backtracking would have been a good idea, or moving the king back. But in any case, we see another pawn 1. Queen comes on, double check wins the queen. The bishop is a wonderful defender, so bishop at f2 is a very cunning way of removing the defender. So it's a very important idea. Queen defends, and these minor pieces are going to cause trouble. To get the queens off with check, that's the key. This move here, queens come off with check, and black's task is made a lot easier. Okay, so nice finish. Okay, so that was then 6 games to 2, with 2 more games to go. And in game 9, we've seen this opening before, but an early at h4, at h5. Just really going for it. But then after all that, white castles queenside. Still, a little bit of a mouse slip, because here surely JK meant to just take the queen, or maybe he was expecting a knight on g1. So he pre-moved, or almost pre-moved, rook to d8. And suddenly that rook just hangs for free. Pretty much for free. Okay. White begins an attack of his own. Takes, takes the bishop, takes the knight. He's going to use these pieces to try and find a mate. So white actually has a mate here, and did find a mate indeed. So, but if, just as an example, if white had just done nothing, then I think black had something in store. Rook at c1 is apparently strong. Rook at c1, knight takes c1, queen takes c1, king takes c1, at d2, just trying to bring the king. If you stay on the back rank, you're just going to pick up the queen, the older queen. If you step up, then maybe you can face a check. But in any case, we see here, this would be a possible line. And bring the queen in to finish. If there is a queen, there's no queen. Okay, well that will do. Okay, but what happens? King here, rook on the back rank, he wins the queen with check, and it's all over. Okay, so now the very last game of JKtheBullfrog against Fumitoks. Fumitoks has won the last two games, games 8 and 9. Could he finish on a high, despite losing the match, because JK was already on 6 points. So why not knight takes knight? What was he afraid of? Maybe afraid of some kind of pin, but then he can just castle as he did. But he castles first, then takes the knight, and then plays f4. And then develops the knight. Well, exchanges it for a bunch of pieces, threatens f6 with a king and queen fork, which is now defended with at e7. Now, this I think is a mistake. He's taking away the h7 pawn. Okay, he's winning a pawn, but he's winning a pawn that just opens up the black rook onto his own king. And so black quickly castles, tries to get rid of the knight. Knight exchanges itself for the bishop. Exchange, and now b7 is a severe weakness. Probably c6 is forced. Goes with the knight. Okay, queen is still looking slightly trapped, but it still has a little bit of a place to go. Still advance 1 square. But instead, d3. So black is opening up the bishop file. So check. Knight e2 check. Knight here check. Then the queen comes in, threatening what? So he still doesn't want to do king takes knight. Knight here check, takes, king here. White tries to go on the counter-attack. Just doesn't have anything. Okay, so black won on time, but black would have been mating by something like this. Okay, so it is 5 AM, now 5:40 AM. So although I was originally planning on doing 3 matches, I think it's best if I stop with just that one. And I think that's a good amount, a good number of games. 10 games of JKtheBullfrog against National Master Fumitoks. And I think we've had a good sense of the openings that were played by both players in these games. And nice fight back from Fumitoks from 5-1 and then from 5-1 down, but unfortunately for him still losing 6-4. Definitely a very good match. And yeah, if time permits, I hope to cover more of the matches which weren't live streamed. So thanks for watching. Sorry that I had to shut off the music after a couple of minutes. That would have been nicer to have it on, but okay.